A total of 3 boyfriends. Every single one of them dropped dead right after eating my mom's homemade lasagna. The situation was so bizarre that a special task force was formed just to investigate their deaths. They spent 6 months on it, tearing our house apart, and still found nothing. The whole ordeal scared me so much that I didn't dare date anyone for 2 years. In the 3rd year, I finally started to move on from the shadow of the past and fell in love again. But with 3 dead boyfriends behind me, I was terrified. I refused to bring my new boyfriend, Mark, home to meet my mom. He, however, was eager to talk marriage and persistently begged me to take him home. This time my mom, following our family tradition, made her special lasagna. Not long after we finished dinner, I went to the bathroom. A moment later, I heard my mother scream, "Oh, God, not again. He's dead." I ran out, and the blood drained from my face. Mark, who had been perfectly fine just minutes before, was slumped on the couch, his body stiff and cold. He looked like he'd been dead for a while. I was frozen solid staring at Mark's lifeless body on the sofa. My face was ashen, my eyes burning with tears. "How did this happen, Mark? Wake up. Don't do this to me." My hand trembled as I reached out to check for his breath. But my mother grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Lucy, what are we going to do? Your boyfriend, he's dead, too. We have to call the police. We have to call them now." My mom is the most timid, law-abiding person I know. Her first instinct is always to call the authorities. Her face pale, she fumbled with her phone to dial 911. They said they're on their way. "Lucy, honey, don't look." I collapsed onto the couch, my entire world spiraling into darkness. How could he be dead, too, Mom? This is the 4th one. My mom looked at me with pity, sighing heavily. She seemed to have aged a decade in a single night. Before long, the task force, along with a team of medical examiners, had swarmed our house. Detective Reed, the lead investigator, saw us and couldn't help but sigh. "How is it that it's your house again? What happened this time?" My mom shook her head like a rattle. "We don't know, Detective. We just don't know." They immediately secured the scene and began a full autopsy on site. My mom and I sat by the door waiting in silence. This was the 4th time. Even the detectives and coroners felt like old acquaintances. During a break, one of the junior medical examiners leaned in and whispered to us, "Mrs. Mills, no offense, but have you ever thought maybe this house is bad luck? Every time your daughter brings a boyfriend home, something terrible happens. It's like a curse. It's just morbid. Maybe you should think about selling the place, moving somewhere else." My mother's lips tightened, her face white as she shook her head. "It's just the 2 of us. Lucy's father died a long time ago. This house is all we have. Our roots are here. Where else would we go?" As she spoke, tears began to fall. "I just feel so terrible for my Lucy. She was finally in a stable, happy relationship, and now this. God, with a boyfriend dead in our home." My mother and I were the primary suspects. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, their faces a mixture of fear and judgment. Another one. "There's something wrong with that family. It's just not natural. I bet the 2 of them are behind it." "Don't say that. The best detectives in the city are on this. If it were them, they would have been arrested after the first one. There has to be something else going on." Hearing their whispers, the vile accusations being thrown at us, my mom grew frantic. "We will cooperate fully, Detective. My daughter, Lucy, she wants a government job someday. You have to clear our names. Please don't let an innocent person be framed for this." Detective Reed tried to console her. "Mrs. Mills, don't you worry. We will do everything in our power to solve this case. We can confirm you had nothing to do with it. You and your daughter will be cleared." But we waited until our stomachs were growling, and still they found nothing. Not a single clue. Even the most experienced medical examiners were shaking their heads in frustration. "This is unbelievable. We can't determine the cause of death. It's the same as the other 3 bodies. Appears to be a sudden cardiac arrest, but with no underlying cause." The city's top forensic team was called in, but even they couldn't crack the puzzle. Once again, I had a boyfriend die in my home. My mother and I clung to each other, pale and trembling. Tears streamed down her face as her composure finally shattered. She let out a desperate wailing cry. "Oh, God, what have we done to deserve this? Is my daughter cursed? Why does every man she loves end up dead in our house?" Soon, a detective from the task force approached me, his eyes studying me intently. "You're Lucy Mills, the deceased. Mark died in a manner identical to the previous 3 victims. I need you to think very carefully. Did they have anything in common?" I fought back my grief and thought hard. Well, the most obvious thing is they were all my boyfriends. Other than that, they didn't know each other. So I don't think. I shook my head, but then something clicked. Sudden, Chilling realization. Wait, I remember now. They all ate my mom's homemade lasagna. The moment the words left my mouth, every detective in the room turned to stare at me. Lasagna? Just like the first 3 times, their investigation circled back to my mom's cooking, but every single time they came up empty. The lasagna never provided any clues. They die after eating lasagna. Are you suggesting someone poison it? A detective asked, his eyes cold as he sized up my mother and me. Never. I would never. My mom cried out. Besides, we're not stupid. If we were going to murder someone, why would we do it with food I made myself in our own home? Do we look like we have a death wish? And for God's sake, he was my daughter's boyfriend. He could have been my son-in-law one day. What possible motive could we have? Detective Reed calmly cut my mother off. Were there any leftovers from dinner tonight? Yes, my mom said quickly. I made way too much sauce. So I made a whole other tray and put in the freezer. And with everything that happened so suddenly, the leftovers from dinner are still on the counter. We didn't have a chance to clean up. They immediately collected everything. The leftover lasagna, the frozen tray, and even the raw ingredients. From the flour used for the fresh pasta, to the meat and spices in my mom's sauce. Everything was tested well. Anything red? Asked the forensics tech. The tech shook his head. No toxins, no poisons, nothing. It's just a normal pan of lasagna. A younger, intense-looking detective named Nathan suddenly looked up at me, his gaze sharp. Lucy, you might as well tell us the truth. Why is your mother so insistent on making lasagna for them? I'd always wondered that myself. I pulled my mom over to explain. She slapped her thigh in frustration, her face a mask of sorrow. Detectives, you don't understand. It's a tradition in our family, especially when a daughter brings a boy home for the first time. The mother is supposed to make her special family recipe meal. And besides, with the holidays coming up, everyone is making big, hearty meals. I've been doing this for generations. How could it be that only my daughter's boyfriends are the ones who have? Something happened to them? It's a damn tragedy. But Nathan didn't let up. His eyes still fixed on me. Maybe there's a more sophisticated poisoning method we're not seeing. My face went pale. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but before I could speak, Detective Reed stepped in. Nathan, the chances of that are practically zero. You heard the Emmy. The victim shows no signs of poisoning. That's not what killed him. The task force looked defeated. So we can rule it out. It has nothing to do with your mother's lasagna. I couldn't help but mutter under my breath. Besides, I ate it too, didn't I? My mom makes lasagna all the time. And before all this happened, it was my favorite food. This time, I had been so worried about Mark that I barely had an appetite and only ate a few bites. But my mom had 2 huge helpings. If there was poison in the lasagna, how are we still standing here? With every theory hitting a dead end, the task force moved on to another possibility. A crime of passion. Someone who was obsessed with me. Detective Reed turned to me. Lucy, think hard. Is there anyone like that? Someone who pursued you, couldn't have you, and is now taking out his anger on your boyfriends from the shadows? It's a possibility. I racked my brain, and then my eyes shut up. Actually, there might be someone. As all eyes in the room turned to me, I had no choice but to tell them everything. There was a guy I met through work, Trevor. He pursued me for a while, but he was a heavy smoker and just not my type. So I turned him down after that. He threatened me a few times, both directly and indirectly. He said that when he wants a woman, he gets her no matter the cost. I told him I had a boyfriend, and he just smirked and said, we wouldn't last long. The more I said, the more the goosebumps crawled at my arms. I was on the verge of tears looking pleadingly at Detective Reed. Detective, do you think it could be him? But how would he know every time I got a new boyfriend? And how could he kill them so flawlessly without a trace? Detective Reed looked thoughtful. We can't be sure he's the killer, but he's certainly a person of interest. To test this theory, we'll need to investigate further. The task force proposed a plan. Nathan would pose as my new boyfriend and come to my house for dinner. Me, him. Nathan and I spoke at the same time. Seeing the utter reluctance on his handsome face, I frowned. Can't you pick someone else? Detective Reed just smiled. He's the only one in the unit who is close to your age. It's more believable this way. Fine. So Nathan, as instructed, came over to my house pretending to be my boyfriend. I replicated the entire scenario from when Mark came over. My mom wiped her tears and forced a smile, chopping vegetables and preparing the lasagna just as she had before. While we waited for it to bake, I poured a glass of juice from the fridge and handed it to Nathan. This is my favorite. You should try it. Nathan shot me an annoyed look. I rolled my eyes. I slammed the glass down on the table and muttered, drink it or don't. I don't care. For some reason, This guy acted like he had a personal vendetta against me, glaring at me every chance he got. I couldn't figure it out. Finally, I asked him, "Nathan, what is your problem with me?" He just snorted and turned away, his gaze falling on a childhood photo of me on the wall. "Looks like you were trouble even back then." That was it. I shot to my feet, my eyes welling up. "Nathan, what is that supposed to mean? Why are you so prejudiced against me? Deep down you think I'm the one who killed them, don't you?" Tears streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable. Nathan froze, suddenly looking flustered. He quickly handed me a tissue. "Hey, don't cry." His voice was awkward. "I didn't mean it like that. Don't overthink it." But this time I wouldn't back down. "And what did you mean? You've been on this case since the beginning, and every time you see me, you look like you want to punch a wall. This time it was my boyfriend, Mark, who died. He's gone. And I'm the one who's heartbroken. But you're still blaming me." Nathan was silent for a long time, just looking at me. Finally, he sighed. "I just think you're a bit of a black widow. And it's a damn shame about those lives. But no matter how much effort it takes, we're going to get to the bottom of this." The silence in the kitchen was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the bubbling of my mother's lasagna in the oven. The scent of garlic, oregano, and roasting tomatoes, a smell that used to mean comfort and home, now felt like the stench of a graveyard. I stared at Nathan, my chest heaving as his words echoed in the small space. "A bit of a black widow. You think I enjoy this?" My voice cracked, dropping to a furious whisper. "You think I want to be the girl whose boyfriends leave in body bags? Every time I close my eyes, I see Mark's face. I see David's, Ian's, and Paul's. I have to live with that terror for the rest of my life. If you think I'm a killer, then arrest me. Put me in handcuffs right now. But don't stand in my kitchen, eating my mother's food, and treat me like a monster." Nathan swallowed hard. The arrogant, hard-edged detective facade cracked, revealing a guy who suddenly looked entirely out of his depth. He opened his mouth, closed it, and finally ran a hand through his dark hair. "Lucy, I'm sorry," he muttered, looking genuinely ashamed. "I'm a cop. I'm trained to look at the statistics, and the statistics say that 4 dead men in one house isn't a coincidence. But you're right. It was out of line. I know you're hurting. I want to catch the bastard doing this, and the frustration is making me blind." Before I could respond, the kitchen door swung open. My mother walked in, her face pale, carrying a tray of garlic bread. Her hands shook so badly the bread rattled against the ceramic plate. "It's almost ready," she said, her voice hollow. She looked at Nathan with a mixture of hope and utter terror. "Please, detective, just tell me you won't die tonight." Nathan straightened up, his professional demeanor returning. He offered my mother a gentle, reassuring smile that I hadn't expected from him. "I'm not planning on it, Mrs. Mills. My team is surrounding the house. Detective Reed is in the surveillance van parked down the street. We have cameras on the front and back doors. If anyone tries to slip in, we'll have them before they make it to the porch." My mother nodded weakly, setting the bread down. The timer on the oven buzzed, a harsh, mechanical shriek that made all 3 of us jump. It was time. We set the table exactly as it had been the night Mark died. My mother sat at the head, me on her left, Nathan on her right. She served him a massive portion of the lasagna, the melted mozzarella stretching in thick, steaming ribbons. "Dig in," she whispered. Nathan picked up his fork. He looked at the food, then at me. I could see a flicker of real anxiety in his eyes. Despite all the forensic tests clearing the food, taking that first bite required an insane amount of courage. He pierced a piece of the pasta, lifted it to his mouth, and chewed. For a long moment, nobody spoke. We just watched him. "It's really good," Nathan said, his voice laced with surprise. "Actually, it's incredible." "Thank you," my mom choked out, a tear slipping down her cheek. We ate in a suffocating, unbearable tension. Every time Nathan cleared his throat, my mother flinched. Every time he reached for his water, my heart skipped a beat. But dinner passed uneventfully. Nathan ate his entire plate. He didn't choke. He didn't collapse. "All right," Nathan said quietly, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "This is the critical window. Lucy, you went to the bathroom right after dinner, correct?" I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yes. I was in there for maybe 3 minutes. When I came out, Mom was screaming. 'Mrs. Mills, where were you?' "I was at the sink," she replied, her voice trembling. "I had my back turned to the living room. I was running the water to wash the plates. I didn't hear anything. Not a single sound. I just turned around to ask Mark if he wanted coffee and he was gone." Nathan stood up. He walked over to the living room and sat down on the beige sofa, the exact spot. "Okay, let's play it out," Nathan said, leaning back. Underneath his casual button-down shirt, I knew he was wearing a wire, communicating with Reed and the tactical team outside. Go ahead, Lucy. I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I walked down the short hallway toward the bathroom. I stepped inside, but I didn't shut the door all the way. I left a tiny crack, pressing my eye against it to watch the living room. From the kitchen, I heard the sound of the faucet turning on. The water began to run, loud and steady. Nathan sat on the couch, pretending to look at his phone. The house was painfully quiet, save for the rush of tap water. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked heavily. Tick, tock. 1 minute passed. Then 2. I held my breath, my eyes straining in the dim light of the hallway. I expected the front door to burst open. I expected Trevor, the creepy guy from my office, to smash through a window with a weapon. But nothing happened. Then I saw it. It wasn't a break-in from the outside. To the left of the living room was an old, heavy oak door that led down to our unfinished basement. My mother and I rarely went down there, using it only for storing old holiday decorations. The handle of the basement door silently, excruciatingly slowly, began to turn. My blood turned to ice. The killer was already inside. He had been inside the whole time. I opened my mouth to scream a warning to Nathan, but fear paralyzed my vocal cords. The basement door cracked open. A figure dressed entirely in black, wearing a dark ski mask and rubber gloves, slipped out of the shadows with the grace of a ghost. The intruder didn't have a gun. In his right hand, he held a strange, elongated metallic cylinder. It looked almost like a thick pen or an auto-injector. He moved silently across the carpet, stepping perfectly to avoid the creaky floorboards. He knew the layout of our house. He knew exactly where to step. He closed the distance to the back of the sofa in 3 long strides. Nathan, facing away from the hallway, was completely oblivious. The running water in the kitchen masked the sound of the intruder's footsteps. The figure raised the metallic cylinder, aiming it at the back of Nathan's neck. "Nathan!" I shrieked, my voice finally tearing free from my throat as I threw the bathroom door open and lunged into the hallway. Nathan spun around just as the intruder lunged. The cylinder struck Nathan's shoulder instead of his neck. There was a sharp, pressurized hiss. Nathan roared in pain, grabbing the man's arm. The intruder was strong, throwing a brutal punch that caught Nathan in the jaw. Nathan stumbled backward, but his police instincts kicked in. He tackled the man over the coffee table, shattering the glass top in an explosion of shards. "Reed, we have a breach." Inside the house, Nathan yelled, but his voice already sounded strangely slurred. My mother screamed from the kitchen, dropping a plate that shattered on the tile. I grabbed the heavy brass fire poker from the fireplace and ran toward them. The intruder kneed Nathan in the stomach, shoving him off. Nathan hit the floor, and I saw something terrifying. His eyes were rolling back, his hands clutching his chest. He was gasping for air, his face turning a horrifying shade of gray. The poison, whatever was in that cylinder, it was already working. The masked man scrambled to his feet, panting heavily. He looked at Nathan, then turned his dark, masked eyes toward me. He took a step forward. I didn't hesitate. Adrenaline and years of pent-up trauma exploded within me. "You son of a bitch!" I screamed, swinging the heavy brass poker with everything I had. The metal connected with the side of the intruder's knee with a sickening crack. The man let out a muffled howl of agony and collapsed, clutching his leg. Before he could recover, the front door was kicked off its hinges. Detective Reed and a swarm of heavily armed SWAT officers flooded into the living room, flashlights cutting through the dust, assault rifles raised. "Drop it. Get on the ground. Do it now," Reed roared. Officers pinned the screaming intruder to the floor, slapping heavy iron cuffs on his wrists. I dropped the poker, my hands shaking violently, and dropped to my knees beside Nathan. He was convulsing, his lips turning blue. He clawed at his shirt, fighting for breath. "Medic! We need a medic in here right now," Reed bellowed into his radio, rushing over to us. "Nathan, stay with me," I pleaded, grabbing his hand. It was terrifyingly cold. "Please don't die. You can't die." A pair of tactical paramedics pushed past me, dropping a massive medical kit on the floor. "He's in VFib. Cardiac arrest," one of them shouted. "Push 1 milligram of AP. Get the pads on him." They tore open Nathan's shirt. I was shoved backward into my mother's arms. She held me tight, both of us sobbing as we watched the paramedics place the defibrillator pads on his chest. Clear. Nathan's body jolted violently off the floor. The monitor flatlined. A high-pitched, continuous beep pierced the room. Again. Charge to 200. Clear. Another brutal shock. Beep, beep, beep. "We have a rhythm," the paramedic yelled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's faint, but he's back. Let's move him. Go, go, go." They loaded Nathan onto a stretcher and wheeled him out the door, the the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance casting eerie shadows across the walls of my home. I stood there, trembling, unable to process what had just happened. My living room was destroyed. Glass was everywhere. Detective Reed stood slowly. He looked furious, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like stone. He walked over to the intruder, who was groaning in pain on the floor, surrounded by 3 cops. "Let's see the face of the coward who kills innocent men," Reed growled. He reached down and violently yanked the ski mask off the man's head. My mother gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth. I stared, my mind short-circuiting. It wasn't Trevor. It wasn't my creepy coworker. It was a young man with neatly parted blonde hair, though it was currently matted with sweat. He looked pale, pathetic, and terrified. "Arthur Vance," Reed said softly, his voice dripping with venom. It was the junior medical examiner. The guy who had whispered to us just hours ago, telling us our house was cursed and that we should sell it. "You," I breathed, stepping forward. "You killed Mark. You killed all of them."
Why?
"I don't even know you." Arthur sneered at me, though he winced as an officer tightened his grip. "You stupid, stubborn women. You were never supposed to stay this long. Get him out of here," Reed barked. "Lock him in the coldest room down at the precinct. And call the forensics lab. I want a full lockdown on everything this piece of garbage has ever touched." The next 48 hours were a blur of hospitals, police stations, and blinding realizations. Nathan survived. Because he had been struck in the shoulder rather than directly in the carotid artery or a major vein, and because the paramedics had been stationed outside, the poison hadn't fully stopped his heart long enough to cause brain death. I sat by his hospital bed on the second day, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. He looked pale and exhausted, and 4 dripping fluids into his arm. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at me and offered a weak, crooked smile. "You hit him with a fire poker," Nathan rasped, his voice gravelly. I let out a breathless laugh, tears welling in my eyes. "You're lucky I didn't hit you with it. You scared me to death, Nathan." He shifted, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Lucy. About everything. About what I said. You're the bravest person I know. You saved my life." "We saved each other," I whispered, gently squeezing his good hand. The hospital room door opened, and Detective Reed walked in. He looked exhausted, carrying a thick manila folder, but there was a distinct look of triumph in his eyes. "Glad to see you awake, kid," Reed said, patting Nathan's foot. "You took a hell of a hit." "What was it, boss?" Nathan asked, struggling to sit up. "What did he hit me with?" Reed pulled up a chair and opened the file. "We got the full confession out of Vance. And let me tell you, it's one of the most twisted things I've seen in 30 years on the job." Reed turned to me. "Lucy, the weapon he used was a modified pneumatic auto-injector, the kind they use in the military for instant adrenaline shots. Only he wasn't injecting adrenaline. He filled it with a highly refined, synthetic potassium chloride compound, mixed with a rapid-dissolving paralytic. It hits the bloodstream, stops the heart almost instantly, and then dissipates, leaving no toxicological footprint." "But how did the autopsies miss it?" I asked, shuddering. "Because Arthur Vance was the one running the primary tox screens," Reed explained grimly. "As the junior me, he was assigned to handle the initial fluid pulls for your past 3 boyfriends. He deliberately excluded the tests that would have shown the minor chemical markers left behind. He steered the senior examiners towards sudden cardiac arrest. He literally controlled the narrative." Nathan frowned. "But why? If he wasn't obsessed with Lucy, what was his motive? Why kill 4 innocent men?" Reed looked at me. "Lucy, did your mother ever tell you who owned your house before your parents bought it 25 years ago?" I shook my head, confused.
No.
"Just that they bought it at a bank auction for really cheap." "You bought it cheap because it was the property of a man named Silas Thorne," Reed said. "Thorne was a high-level thief back in the 90s. He pulled off a massive diamond heist in Chicago. $2 million in uncut stones. He was caught and went to federal prison where he died 10 years ago. The diamonds were never recovered." My jaw dropped. "Are you saying?" Reed nodded. "Thorne hid the diamonds inside the house. Specifically, inside the false foundation of the basement wall. Vance found out about this a year ago. His uncle was a guard at the prison where Thorne died, and Thorne supposedly mumbled the location on his deathbed. Vance's uncle died, leaving Vance an old journal with the details. The pieces were suddenly slamming together in my mind. "Vance wanted the house," I whispered. "Exactly," Reed said. "He needed you and your mother to move out so he could buy it, or at least break in while it was vacant, to tear down the walls. But your mother is a homebody. She rarely leaves, and she steadfastly refused to sell. He knew 2 women living alone could easily be frightened. He wanted to create a curse, to terrorize you into packing your bags." "But why my boyfriends?" I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. Because you bringing men into the house was a threat to him, Reed said. Every time you got serious with a guy, you were bringing a protector into the home. He was terrified you'd get married, move a husband in, start a family, and secure the house for another 50 years. So, he used his knowledge of the property. He had made a duplicate key a year ago when your mother hired a plumber. Vance posed as the assistant. I felt a chill run down my spine. He had been walking through our home. He knew your family tradition, Reed continued.
He stalked you.
He knew that when you brought a boy home for the first time, your mother made her famous lasagna. It was the perfect, predictable event. The boyfriend would eat a heavy meal, making the sudden cardiac arrest slightly more plausible to a coroner. While you and your mom were in the kitchen or the bathroom, Vance would slip out of the basement, inject the victim, and vanish back downstairs before the body even hit the floor. He'd wait out the police chaos hiding in the basement crawlspace, and then walk out the front door hours later wearing his meat jacket, pretending he just arrived on the scene. Silence hung heavy in the hospital room. It was brilliant. It was flawless. And it was pure evil. He's going away forever, Reed promised, his voice hard. We already tore down the basement wall. We found the lockbox. $2 million in diamonds. And because the original insurance company paid out and went bankrupt 20 years ago, and Thorne has no living heirs, a judge might rule that your family has a legal claim to a finder's fee. You and your mom might be looking at a substantial reward. I didn't care about the money. I just cared that the nightmare was finally over. The suffocating shadow that had followed me for 3 years, whispering that I was cursed, that I destroyed everything I loved, was finally gone. I looked at Nathan. He was watching me with a soft, gentle expression. I guess this means your mom's lasagna is officially cleared of all charges, Nathan joked weakly. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I laughed, wiping it away. Yeah, it is. 6 months later, the house smelled like garlic, oregano, and roasting tomatoes. My mother was humming in the kitchen, a sound I hadn't heard in years. She looked younger, the heavy burden of the past completely lifted from her shoulders. The reward money had paid off our mortgage and allowed my mother to finally fix up the house, but she still refused to move. This was our home. And now, there were no ghosts haunting it.
The doorbell rang.
I hurried to the door, smoothing down my dress. When I opened it, Nathan was standing on the porch. He held a bouquet of sunflowers in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. He looked handsome, healthy, and completely healed, save for a small scar on his shoulder. You're late, detective, I teased, stepping aside to let him in. Traffic was a nightmare, he smiled, leaning in to kiss my cheek. But I wouldn't miss this. We walked into the dining room. The table was set beautifully. My mother came out of the kitchen, carrying a massive, bubbling tray of her homemade lasagna. Nathan, she beamed, setting the tray down. Sit, sit. You must be starving. I saved my appetite all day, Mrs. Mills, Nathan said, taking a seat. My mom served him a huge slice. The cheese stretched perfectly. I sat next to him, watching him closely. You sure you're ready for this? I whispered playfully. No wire? No backup outside. Nathan picked up his fork, looking at me with a warmth that made my heart flutter. I don't need backup anymore, he said softly. I've got you. He took a bite of the lasagna, closed his eyes in pure bliss, and smiled. For the first time in years, we simply ate dinner. No fear. No screams. Just the warmth of good food, the ticking of the grandfather clock, and the beautiful promise of tomorrow.